Dan Coates, so I know the legislative process both in the General Assembly and also from in the big leagues in Washington, D.C. As former in-house counsel for a medical malpractice company, I have lobbied state legislators across the country for insurance reform, effectively including here in Indiana. I am now in-house counsel for a financial services company, and I think I'll bring a unique perspective on markets and their impact on Indiana, and we'll be able to maybe serve as an expert in that sense in the General Assembly. And finally, through my experiences, former political experiences, and also my long-term association with the Indiana Policy Review, I've been able to make strong contacts with a lot of current state legislators down in Indianapolis, and I think that will help me be a very effective leader in Indiana, in the General Assembly, and make an impact immediately for the 83rd House District. There actually is some, people may ask, well, Phil, if you were interested in the House seat, in the congressional seat, or I should say the state representative seat, why are you suddenly jumping in, for this House seat? There's actually some history there. Back in 2008, when then Senator Bob Meeks retired, and there was a caucus to fill his Senate seat, I was approached by people who thought that Matt Bell would win that caucus and asked to run for Matt's seat if he were to be successful, and I had agreed to do that. Obviously, he was unsuccessful, and Marlin Stutzman won that seat. But at that point, there was no reason for me to run against Matt Bell. I mean, Matt has been an effective conservative voice for us in Indianapolis, and there was just absolutely no reason for me to challenge him at that point. By contrast, when I got into the congressional race back in November of last year, I noted that I was waiting for somebody else to jump into the race to challenge Congressman Sutter. I think the line I used at the time was from Lou Holtz, where Lou had said, the reason we fail is that nobody does what everybody agrees somebody should do. Well, that's obviously not the problem now in this caucus. I think everybody who ever had any ambition whatsoever to be a United States congressman is now in this race. But after participating in some of the candidate forums, I now feel confident that whomever is elected in this upcoming caucus on Saturday will be a conservative voice, and frankly, for those reasons, I don't think that I'm needed in that race at this point. And like I said, I think I'm much more needed in the caucus for the 83rd House District, and can be a much more effective leader right away in that position. And finally, from my family standpoint, this would be helpful as well. Before I ran for Congress back in November of last year, I sat down with my daughter, and we sat in front of a computer, and I showed her, I pulled up the congressional calendar. I said, well, if Dad's elected, these will be the days that I'll be in Washington, D.C., and these will be the days that I'll be home, and will you be okay if I'm away these periods of time? And her response was, Dad, if you run for Congress, will you get to give speeches? And I said, yes, I will. And she said, well, will I get to come? And I said, yes, I will. She said, absolutely, then you need to run for Congress. And she's been very enthusiastic about it since then. The good news is, by running for state representative, if I'm elected, my daughter will still be able to come watch me give speeches. My daughter will still be able to participate in parades with me as I go out and campaign. But as opposed to being away in Washington, D.C., I will now be able to also participate in her parent-teacher conferences to help coach her softball team. And those are very, very strong reasons why I would want to choose Indianapolis over Washington, D.C. And finally, I would just note, as I went through the congressional race, I was always amazed that people I had never met before, who were willing to make tremendous sacrifices, starting with my campaign manager, Terry Hively, but others as well, to support my candidacy. And I hope by making this decision, I don't disappoint too many people. However, as I've made calls, like I said, to my key supporters, the news has been received very enthusiastically, and I feel very comfortable about my decision, and I hope I can convince the precinct committee people in the 83rd District, and then eventually the voters of the 83rd District, that I will be the most effective voice they can have in Indianapolis to represent their interests. So with that, I will close, but open it up for any questions that anybody might have.
Did anybody approach you to run for Matt Bell's seat?
Yes, actually they did, and I hope I'm not disclosing any confidences here. I will say one one county chairman called me the day, actually the early morning, the day after Matt announced, and asked if I would be interested.
Who was that?
Jim Banks from Whitley County. asked, and Jim was just elected to the state senate, and his comment was, I'd love to have another troublemaker with me down in Indianapolis, and that we need another conservative voice down there. Also then, later that same morning, Matt Bell contacted me to ask if I would be interested in the seat. When I said that I would be, Matt was very gracious. He and I had lunch on Friday, and we spent quite a bit of time walking through my background, but then he also spent time telling me about his experience in Indianapolis, what I would expect, issues that I could expect to see at the forefront in this next session upcoming. And so Matt's been very, very helpful in that regard.
Are you saying that Matt has endorsed you?
No, Matt has not endorsed me. You can contact Matt to ask him. He was uncommittal at that point. He didn't say he would, didn't say he wouldn't, said he'd have to think about it. So you can contact him to ask if, if he's made a decision in that regard.
Talk a little bit about switching campaigns. Third district congressional seat. Now you're running for House.
Right. The first hurdle, obviously, is I have to get through is the caucus, and so really it's the same type of campaign, just much smaller. Instead of now hitting 520 precinct committee people, I only have to hit about 50, 55 precinct people. 9 of them in Whitley County, 10 in Noble County, and the remainder here in Allen County. And so that's what I intend to do now, is really start, making those personal contacts with each of those precinct committee people to explain why I think I would be the most effective candidate, not only in the fall for the Republican Party, but also the most effective representative for the people of the 83rd District if I'm elected.
And when is that caucus?
I have not received official word, but in talking with Matt Bell, he said that it would have to take place by June the 30th. So it's going to take place fairly quickly here.
Okay.
Yes.
But kind of going back to his question.
Yes.
For people who think that you're just jumping around trying to get a seat or an office, a position, what do you have to say to that?
Well, and what I would say is, like I said, I had been thinking about this seat early on, several years ago when I was first approached, and when it then was not open, like I said, there was no reason for me to run against Matt Bell. It's just, he was already a conservative leader. I supported his, candidacy. If I really just wanted to run for a seat, I would have, challenged him in the primary, as opposed to Congressman Souder, who I, knew very well, but did not think he was acting as a fiscal conservative for us, and that's why I challenged him in the congressional race. Like I said, the dynamics changed greatly once Mark announced that he was going to be resigning. Having gone, been active in politics for some time, including, I was on Capitol Hill when Dan Coates had to resign his House seat to run for the Senate, and saw at that point that a number of candidates jumped in. And so it doesn't surprise me, maybe the sheer number does, but I knew once Mark resigned that you would start getting state representatives, state senators, other people wanting to run for that seat in the caucus. It's a short time frame. You don't have, Terry and I were out every night, every weekend for 6 months slogging through the campaign, knowing that, trying to knock off an incumbent, we had less than a 5% chance of winning. Now in a caucus, like I said, everybody has pretty much an equal chance to go at it. And like I said, looking at it realistically, when this first came out, I waited to make my announcement for several reasons. One, I was down in Indianapolis at the time. This came at the worst possible time for me. I was in Indianapolis for a 2-week arbitration hearing that I could not get out of. But secondly, I waited because I wanted to see if the Republican Party was going to coalesce behind one particular candidate, and wanted to give them the opportunity to do so, rather than just jumping out and throwing out my hat in the ring immediately. I was told that no, they were going to remain independent, and so decided to that I was going to file my candidacy. But as my campaign manager can tell you, during our first staff meeting, I indicated that, frankly, I had an interest in the 83rd Congressional District and thought, or in the 83rd House District, and thought there might be, if Senator Stutzman were to have won, Matt would have run for his state Senate seat. That would have opened up Matt's seat, and I was already talking about that to my volunteers several weeks ago. That really was where my heart was at that point. So.
What do you think is the number one issue that you would be dealing with in the 83rd District?
Obviously, the budget is going to be the biggest issue that is going to face the General Assembly in the next session. Even though Governor Daniels has done just a tremendous job with our budget thus far, we still see revenues coming in far shorter than had been expected. Chances are we're still going to need cuts, which is going to be difficult because we've already made, some very large cuts. But, I think Indiana is one of 2 states right now that has been able to maintain its budget surplus, and we need to continue that. And so I think that is going to dominate the session again in 2011. And also, the other big issue will obviously be redistricting. After the census, we're going to have to redistrict all the congressional seats, the House seats, the Senate seats here in Indiana, and so that will be a major political battle as well.